What's up guys, it's Eric from Rare Candy and welcome back to another deck and battle here on PTCGO, and this time we're taking a look at a deck that is becoming, I think, one of my more favorite decks to play, just in terms of how fun it is, and that's going to be Tapu Koko, Necrozma GX, Garbodor, or whatever else you want to call it, the spread dot deck basically. But yeah, so it's kind of a spread deck, and we have some cute tricks in the deck kind of revolving around the fact that we're spreading a lot of damage. And actually at the World Championship, I believe there was a player who made it fairly deep into the tournament with this deck, or a concept similar to this. And also at the recent expanded regional in Fort Wayne, I believe this deck had a decent showing as well, since in expanded there's a bunch of other tools that this deck gains access to. But this is going to be for the standard format, and let's take a look at it and see what it's all about. So our lead Pokemon in the deck is going to be two of these Tapu Koko with the Flying Flip attack. Just for a double colorless energy, it does 20 to each of your opponent's Pokemon. That might seem somewhat insignificant, but we actually, like I said, kind of our whole strategy is based around spread damage, and so we have some interesting tricks in our deck in order to capitalize on, some damaged Pokemon that our opponent has in play. But it's just a nice attack. It softens up things for us to finish off later with a Garbodor, or maybe with the Tapu Lele. But like I said, we're mainly trying to spread damage, and I'll get to kind of the interesting ways we have to manipulate that damage in just a second. Also very nice because it has free retreat, which means if we play something like a Guzma, we will have a free retreater to promote in order to retreat into whoever that we want afterwards. But the other main spread Pokemon in this deck is going to be two Necrozma GX. So we're playing this card for its GX move, Black Ray GX. For 3 colorless energy, it does 100 to each of your opponent's GX and EX. So Tapu Koko, definitely pretty good in the early turns. Necrozma is definitely much stronger in the late game against, all of these setup-based GX decks that have been running around, like Metagross and Gardevoir and, Tapu Bulu and things of that nature. So once your opponent's gotten out like a bunch of their GXs, Black Ray GX is just very, very good. Also worth noting too, the promo Tapu Koko, very solid against most decks, but in things like Volcanion, which just play basics, and usually just a bunch of basic EXs and GXs at that, Necrozma is actually a little bit better. So that's why we're playing the even split between both of these. So the other, I guess, key component of the deck is going to be a 4/4 Garbodor line. We are playing a split between 3 of the Trash Range Garbodor. So this is the one that does 20 damage times the amount of item cards in your opponent's discard pile. So this is very good because in the early game, we do want to spread a lot of damage to Tapu Koko and Necrozma. And in the early portions of the game, your opponent typically doesn't have that many item cards actually in the discard pile. So the idea is you can soften your opponent's board up with Tapu Koko and kind of clean up later with your Garbodors. But then also we are playing one of the other Garbodor with the Garbotoxin ability. If this Pokemon has a tool card attached to it, it shuts off abilities for all Pokemon. So just a little extra form of disruption, and the format at the time of filming is quite ability reliant, so Garbotoxin is still a very, very strong ability. But here's where the deck gets a little bit more interesting. We're playing one Espeon EX. We're playing it for its Miraculous Shine attack. This is seeming like it's becoming a card that's gaining more and more popularity for this attack, but you get to de-evolve each of your opponent's evolved Pokemon and put the highest stage back into your opponent's hand. So if we get off several flying flips, let's say we get off 3 in the course of a game, and our opponent has like a rare candied Gardevoir GX, just for example. Well, if we play Espeon EX down, we can actually de-evolve that Gardevoir and knock out our opponent's, low HP basic Pokemon like Ralts, things like Beldums, Alolan Vulpix, etc. So that's kind of the use for Espeon, especially in the late game. Once we have spread a lot of damage, Miraculous Shine really kind of comes in clutch, and you can sometimes go from not having any prizes taken to take 3 or 4 at a time sometimes with this attack. So this is going to be another way we can help clean up games by de-evolving our opponent's Pokemon. But there's going to be some decks that, de-evolving your opponent's Pokemon aren't too relevant. So something like a Volcanion deck or a Turtonator deck or something like that, this attack really doesn't have much merit, and this deck I think struggles a little against against those types of decks. So how are we going to handle that? And that's going to be with a 1/1 Meowstic line. This is kind of a weird inclusion. So definitely a card most people probably aren't too familiar with. But the reason we are playing it is for its attack ear influence. For a psychic energy, move as many damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon as you like to any of their other Pokemon in any way that you like. So this is actually inspired by what the Japanese have been playing. They've been using the promo Tapu Lele, which should be released internationally, I think in the next month or so, if I remember correctly. And it has the same attack for a psychic and colorless energy. But over there, you have to remember they do play a different format, so they do have access to Dimension Valley. So basically the same attack, just for a single psychic energy, and that card has been quite popular in Japan. So that's why we were playing the Meowstic. It's a stage 1, but it still has that same attack, and I think this format is slow enough to where you can get out a stage 1 like Meowstic. And what's good about the card is most people probably have no idea what this card even does. So you can really catch people off guard. And so again, let's say you are going to get something like a Volcanion EX deck. Let's say they have only one baby Volcanion in play, but the rest are EXs and GXs. If you use Black-Ray GX, you do 500 damage to your opponent's entire board. So that's 500 damage you have to play with. And you can take most of your knockouts just by manipulating that damage that's already in play. That's without doing any other attacks. So that's just extremely powerful, being able to use one attack to take the majority of your prizes. So that's just very, very strong. And so it's definitely been a fun card in my testing. And like I said, it's fun to throw down because people have no idea what it is half the time. And then to round out the Pokemon line, we have, of course, 3 Tapu Lele GX for its Wonder Tag ability, just to get a supporter card out of our deck. But also Energy Drive is a solid backup attack as well, 20 for each energy on both active Pokemon. So this can be a good late game attacker if need be as well. So sorry for the long-winded explanation on the Pokemon, just a lot of interactions to go over between all of these different attackers and support Pokemon. But anyways, getting into our supporter cards, a lot of it's pretty standard. 4 Sycamore and 4 N are kind of standard draw supporters. 3 Guzma, so switch your opponent's bench Pokemon with their active Pokemon just to choose what we want to take knockouts on. 1 Bridget. And the one weird card we are playing is 1 copy of Lily. Draw until you have 6 cards in your hand. If it's your first turn, draw until you have 8 cards. Honestly, the only reason I am playing this is because I've been finding turns where I've just been drawing a little bit dead, so I was like, you know what, I'm going to throw 1 more supporter in here and see how this works. So this is definitely a flexible spot in the deck. This was kind of just my my rage response to keep getting dead hands, but it's also a nice alternate first turn option if you prize your Bridget, so it's been okay for me so far, but if there's another card in this list you would want to add, feel free to cut this in favor of that as well. Okay, so 4 Ultra Ball, pretty standard, 2 Rescue Stretcher, 2 Field Blower. 2 Field Blower is especially nice in these Garbodor decks because you get to discard your opponent's tool cards, which adds damage for your Trash Avalanche in the late game. So that's why we definitely want to play at least 2 Field Blowers in this deck. It's also good if your opponent has Float Stones in play, you can remove those and kind of spread behind, maybe like a big Pokemon like Octillery and strain it in the active spot. For Floatstone, we have a lot of high retreat Pokemon. Necrozma GX has an awkward 2 retreat cost. All of our Garbodors have a 3 or more retreat cost. And we need Floatstones in order to activate that Garbotoxin ability. And then 3 Choice Band just to do more damage to GXs and EXs. So the more damage we have in play, the better, because that means more damage we can manipulate with things like Meowstic, or just gets us closer to be able to take a knockout by de-evolving with Espeon. And I guess, let's see, 2 Rescue Stretcher. I guess the only other really notable card in this list is going to be 3 Potown. This is going to be another way we're going to try to get some more damage in play. So whenever any player plays a Pokemon from their hand to evolve one of their Pokemon, put 3 damage counters on that Pokemon. So you can probably see the synergy here with Tapu Koko and Necrozma. It just helps us get more damage in play for us to manipulate. And then 4 DCE and 7 Psychic Energy, pretty standard energy count. But yeah guys, that is going to be the list that we're going to try out let's go over into a game and see how this thing looks in action. Alright guys, so we found ourselves a game here and our opponent is calling the coin flip, which we do lose, so that's never fun. But you know, if we do start with our Tapu Koko promo, we will be able to attack on our first turn, so you know, it could be worse. And our opponent has a Magearna deck box. I don't know if that really tells us too much about what we're playing against. Could be a Metagross deck or something like that. We'll just have to wait and see. But luckily we do actually start with our Tapu Koko promo. That's actually really good. Our hand in general is pretty solid, I won't lie. We have the DCE ready to go, and our opponent is playing Greninja, so I'm actually ecstatic about this. This is a great matchup for us. You know, we have that Garbotox and Garbodor to shut off their abilities, and then Greninja is just so slow in general that we can usually flying flip for maybe about 3 turns before they really get set up. So plenty of time to spread damage and set up some knockouts with Espeon. But here I have to say, our new hand that they end us into, not nearly as good. We do still have plenty to work with, but it definitely wasn't as good as the one before. So, you know, I really want to get a DC this turn, which means we might have to forego our normal strategy where we bridge it for a lot of Pokemon. But what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to use this Lele to grab Bridget out of the deck. That way I can Ultra Ball it away. That way we don't draw into it again in the late game. Just because after the first turn or so, Bridget kind of loses a lot of its value. So here I'm going to grab myself a Trubbish. I'm going to bench that guy. And then we're just going to play N, refresh our hand, and we need DCE. And we do get it. Okay. So that's actually pretty good. We have a decent hand to work with. We have another Trubbish we can get down. And, okay, we actually have some options. We could actually attach to Lele and take a knockout on this Froakie. That's very tempting. Or we could, you know, play like, or we could go for a spread here with Flying Flip. I think this might be the better long-term play, just because once our opponent gets out a Greninja, Tapu Lele is a much worse attacker than this Tapu Koko is. So, you know, I don't mind kind of just playing it slow, capitalizing on how slow this Greninja deck is, and just taking several turns to keep spreading damage. So your opponent is playing Ultra Ball, so no doubt they're going to be looking for one of their Frogadiers to start setting up with water duplicates. And let's see what they're going for. Maybe, okay, so they're grabbing the Frogadier, as expected. Just curious if they have anything else for turn. Sometimes these Greninja decks play some weird techs like Enhanced Hammers and stuff like that. So hopefully they don't have anything weird like that to slow us down. But here opponent's going to play Rescue Stretcher, getting a Staryu out of the deck with Brooklet Hill, and then they're actually going to play Wally. Okay, I was definitely not expecting that one. So that means Greninja is actually going to start being able to put on some pressure a little bit quicker. So maybe I should have actually knocked this thing out in hindsight. But to be fair, I didn't know our opponent played Wally. It's not an inclusion you see all the time. But here, let's put a Psychic Energy down on this Garbodor, and here we can Sycamore our hand away, and hopefully when we get a Float Stone. We do not have a Float Stone, so that's not good. But you know, we're still in an okay spot. We can Flying Flip again. We have this Po Town in play so that, you know, if our opponent keeps evolving their Pokemon, they are going to take some damage in the process. So most likely our Tapu Koko is going to go down, unfortunately, and our opponent has a Field Blower, so, you know, even though we whiffed the Float Stone that turn, maybe it's kind of like a blessing in disguise, just because, you know, we wouldn't have been able to, you know, really stop our opponent's abilities anyway. So, not too big a deal, and, you know, we could have actually Ultra Balled to get out the Garbotox and Garbodor last turn, but I actually specifically did not, just because I don't want to get it out until we have the Float Stone, because otherwise it could be a target. Okay, so our opponent is going to take a knockout like expected. So we need a couple things here. We need a DCE, we need a Float Stone. That's basically about it. Another Po Town would be preferable. So here let's discard Meowstic and Garbodor. Meowstic definitely not too useful in this matchup. I think we'll get more value out of something like Espeon EX instead. So we have our Garbodor. Do we bench the Espeon? That's the question. I think we do, just because if our opponent decides to concentrate on the Espeon, that means, you know, our Tapu Koko is still spreading damage. So let's bench it. And we do hit the float stone, so that's big. And we have the Po-Town as well. So this is actually really big because our opponent did not get down a Frogadier last turn, which means that they're going to be in an awkward spot where they can evolve, but if they do choose to evolve, they will actually get knocked out. Same goes for their Remoraid. So we did whiff the DC, but we still have this Trash Lanch Garbodor to put on some pressure with. And here our opponent actually evolves into Frogadier and knocks out their own Pokemon thanks to Po-Town. I guess they didn't realize it was in play or something, but nevertheless, we take those. I won't say no to that. So here our opponent's going to get back some of their Frogadier line and just Sycamore. And they get a Splash Energy, which is good for them. That will allow them to get their Greninja line back into their hand once it gets knocked out. And here they're just going to retreat into Remoraid. So we are definitely in a crazy good situation. You know, we have Guzma, we can bring up this Greninja, and we can actually just retreat back into our Garbodor and knock it back out. And we do have a Psychic Energy at hand. Where do we want to put that? I think maybe Espeon's the right play. Tapu Lele's not great of an attacker, but here our opponent just concedes. And, you know, I can't say I really blame them there. We had a pretty dominant board position at that point, and just in general, I think that is a good matchup for this deck. So let's get to another one. That game did end kind of quick. So here in this next game, we are going to win the coin flip, which I won't say no to, and we have a pretty solid hand here as well. And let's see what our opponent is playing. Okay, it's going to be a Gardevoir deck, so this could go a couple ways. You know, if they get out a quick Gardevoir GX and take out our Tapu Koko before it really spreads a decent amount, we could be in a bad spot. But if we get off maybe 2 flying flips and maybe 3, you know, I think we'll be okay though. So we're going to use Tapu Lele, grabbing Bridget for our first turn. And here we're just going to take a look at what all is in our deck. Nothing too crucial looks prized from what I can tell. So here we're just going to grab this Bridget. So we definitely want 2 Trubbish, and I think we go for Necrozma GX. I think that seems good. We have the Psychic Energy in hand, so I think that's what I do want to attach to. So let's do that. So by attaching the Psychic Energy, basically all of our attackers are only one more attachment away from attacking, whether it be Lele, Garbodor, or Tapu Koko. So definitely just setting us up to, you know, kind of being able to attack with whoever we need to on the next turn. And here our opponent is going to play their own Tapu Lele, grabbing their own Bridget, to try to set up their field. So we'll probably see maybe 2 Ralts come down and a Remoraid. So yep, that looks like what our opponent is opting to do. And our opponent's going to use Sparkling Wish, which actually is kind of an annoying attack because it will allow our opponent to get around our Po-Towns that we play. And that's actually a really good top deck though. We hit the DCE. And okay, so what do we do here before we Sycamore? Definitely want to attach this DCE. And yeah, I guess we may as well evolve into the Garbodor. But here, what do we discard with Ultra Ball? I think we discard our Field Blower and Rescue Stretcher. Not cards I usually want to get rid of, but we're going to Sycamore anyways, and they don't really have any value right now otherwise. So let's grab that Garbodor and Garbodor. And, you know, if we get a Float Stone, we'll be in a good spot here. Here we're going to Sycamore, and we do hit the Float Stone, and we have Po-Town as well. So this is actually a very, very good turn. You know, we got basically everything we need. And here we're going to do 20 to all of our opponent's Pokemon, and we're going to start all of the spread nonsense. Okay, our opponent's going to evolve into a Corellia. I am cool with that. And a Gardevoir. You know, typically I'm not happy to see Gardevoirs come into play, but if they are taking damage, I won't say no. Here, our opponent is going to end both of us. And this hand is not very good. So no supporters to mess with. And we can't even Ultra Ball for Lele because of our own Garbodor. However, we could actually float or Field Blower our own Float Stone away to use Lele. It'd be unfortunate, but you know, sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. So it really all depends on what our opponent's going to choose to do. So okay, here we're just gonna see a Sparkling Wish, and I am completely okay with that. You know, getting off one more spread with Flying Flip is going to be great here. And here they're actually going for another Garbodor GX, so if that's the case, I actually might even just, we could even just Black Ray GX, that could be good. The question is, do we get rid of our own Garbotoxin's Floatstone? That's the question. What do we really need this turn other than an energy attachment? And I'm trying to think, and honestly, I think we're in a good spot. We might be able to just take this turn to just retreat and use Black Ray GX, and then respond next turn accordingly if we have to. So yeah, it seems good. We can use Black Ray. That'll do 100 damage to both Gardevoir and the Tapu Lele. So from here, you know, we can actually just probably clean up with our Garbodors, to be honest. You know, these Gardevoir GXs already have 150 damage each, so it doesn't take many items in the discard pile to be able to knock one of these out. So let's see what our opponent's going to be able to do, because if they don't do much, we can even just keep spreading and just win that way. Now we have Espeon in hand as well, so we have all sorts of options at our disposal, but here our opponent concedes yet again. No one can take the spread, they just get too fed up with it, I guess. But you know, even though both these games did end a little abruptly, still I think it shows off kind of the general strategy of the deck. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. But definitely a deck, like I said earlier, I've had a ton of fun playing around with. I definitely encourage you to try it out. It actually has been surprisingly decent and is one of the decks I am considering for the upcoming Connecticut Regionals. We'll have to see though. But yeah, as usual guys, feel free to like and subscribe, and don't forget to check out our merchandise over at rarecandytcg.com. If you can pick up something and help support the channel, it'd mean a lot to us. Also, a big shout out to all of our supporters on Patreon. If you want to learn how to join the Candy Crew and help support our channel that way, I'll also have a link in the description for that. But as usual guys, I appreciate you watching, and we'll see you for the next one.